Hey, what's up, Mavs fans? Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me for the latest episode of Inside the Mavs. If you're listening to the podcast, make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. You can find it on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods for free. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, on Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video and subscribe to my channel here at Kevin Gray Sports, and follow me all over social media at Kevin Gray Sports as well. Mavericks fall in devastating fashion, though, 121-119 on the road against the Cleveland Cavaliers, as the Mavs now start their road trip 0-2, as they have games against Toronto on Wednesday and then the Boston Celtics on Friday. The Mavericks, after having won 7 straight games, now have lost 2 games in a row and are currently 8th in the Western Conference, as they sit a game and a half behind the New Orleans Pelicans for the 5th seed in the West. Right now, as you look at the Western Conference standings, you've got the Pelicans in 5th, the Suns in 6th, the Sacramento Kings in 7th, and the Mavericks sitting there in 8th, with Golden State and the Lakers following behind in 9th and in 10th in the West, respectively. Warriors playing some really good basketball right now, as they're 8-2 in their last 10 games. But a really disappointing loss for the Dallas Mavericks, who were able to really get after the Cleveland Cavaliers after being down by as many as 15 points. They had a 10-point lead with a little over 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. They even turned the Cavaliers over 16 times, scoring 24 points off of those turnovers. Mavericks protected the ball for the most part with only 5 turnovers, but we know that turnovers, when they come at crucial times, can turn the tide of the game. And you saw that, how that took place in the fourth quarter. But the Mavericks, even with all the craziness in that back and forth fourth quarter, had a chance to win the game and were up by 1 after a PJ Washington basket, as he was able to get the no-look pass from Luka Doncic. That put them up by 1. And then Max Strus knocked down that 60-footer from half court to give the Cavs the 121-119 win in a game where you got a combined 75 points from Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, in a game where I tell you that Luka and Kyrie go off for 75. Normally that's a win. You say, Kevin, well, what else could you tell me that would indicate that the Mavericks would have won a game like that? Well, they shot nearly 53% from the field. As I mentioned, only turned the ball over 5 times, scored 24 points off of those turnovers, turned the Cavs over 16 times, and still, unfortunately, did not able to win that basketball game. You give Max Strus, obviously, a ton of credit. He went nuclear in that fourth quarter, scoring 15 of his 21 points in the fourth quarter, at one point knocking out 4 straight threes to pull the Cavs within 1. Of course, Donovan Mitchell hits a lucky bank shot from 3 as well. And you say, Kevin, all of that aside, is a lucky shot from Strus. Donovan Mitchell had that lucky bank 3-point shot himself. The officiating was horrendous in this game, to which I tell you, I don't disagree with you. Whether it be the non-foul call on Josh Green on that corner 3-pointer that he attempted, whether it was the missed call on Tim Hardaway Jr., who got pulled on that Donovan Mitchell 3-point shot that he made, whether it was the referees not calling a foul on Josh Green, as the Mavericks let 15 seconds lapse before they ultimately were able to get the ball back with about 8 seconds left after a Darius Garland turnover on an inbound play. And even then, Evan Mobley was able to tip the pass on the inbound play that Luka Doncic eventually got to get the ball to PJ Washington for him to be able to hit the go-ahead bucket before Strus hit the half-court shot to win the game. As you can tell, it was a wild back and forth fourth quarter between the Mavs and the Cavs, but ultimately it led to a loss, as the Mavericks, who had won their previous 7 games, are now having lost their last 2 games as they continue their road trip, now 0-2 to begin that trip, with games against Toronto on Wednesday and, as I mentioned, Boston on Friday. And it's hard in a game like that to really go through the amount of different things that went on and happened in the game, and the emotion that came with that game also. Again, you give the Cavaliers a lot of credit. They were absolutely terrific in the fourth quarter from the 3-point line. As you look at the numbers from 3 in the fourth quarter alone, they went 7 of 9 from downtown, shooting nearly 78% from 3. They shot 70% overall, going 14 of 20 in the fourth quarter. Mavericks not too shabby themselves, shooting 66% from the field and 45% from three in that fourth quarter, in a quarter where the Cavaliers themselves scored 38 points, Mavericks scoring 37. And of course, it led to Max Strus hitting that game-winning three-pointer. But at the same time, the Mavericks got to put that game away as they get ready to take on the Toronto Raptors on Wednesday and then the Boston Celtics on Friday. Coming up on the other side of this break here, Mavericks got some good news on the injury front for a guy that's finally going to return for the Mavericks. But let's hear from today's sponsor of our video, and our today's sponsor is Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs. Appreciate you hanging out with me through that break there, and appreciate today's sponsor of our video, Aura, for that break there. Mavericks, again, as they get ready to continue their 4-game road trip, as I mentioned before we went to break, got some good news on the injury front as the Mavericks take on the Toronto Raptors on Wednesday. The Mavericks are getting back Dante Exum. Dante Exum, who has missed 22 out of the last 24 games due to a right knee issue and a heel issue, is back and ready to play for the Dallas Mavericks. And we have been talking about this team getting healthy throughout the course of this season, a team that's played more starting lineups than any team in the NBA and have been dealing with health issues all season long. Now it appears for the first time in quite some time are just about as close to 100% as they can be from a health perspective. Now, this does come on the heels, though, unfortunately. Maxi Kleber is not going to play in Wednesday's game against the Toronto Raptors as he continues to have maintenance with that right small toe dislocation that's been bothering him all season long, so he won't be available on Wednesday. Hopefully, he'll be back on Friday when the Mavericks take on Kristaps Porzingis and the Boston Celtics. But this is really good news if you're a Mavericks fan wanting to see this team much closer to being fully formed in terms of their health. Dante Exum is going to provide them another ball handler and another guy that can provide some defense as well. And before he got injured, you saw how he was coming along in terms of knocking down shots from the outside. So when you look at what the Mavericks have from a starting lineup perspective, with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving going to be at the top of the bill every time the Mavericks take the floor, Josh Green, who continues to play well. He also had a big bucket in this game to tie the game at 115 with a transition dunk that he had. He has continued to play well for the Dallas Mavericks. Also, good to see that PJ Washington had a really good game, especially on the offensive end as he continues to come along for this team. And that was one of the things that I was looking for going into the game on Tuesday, which was if PJ Washington could start to find it a little bit offensively. You look at what he was able to do. He was the only other Maverick in double figures with the 11 points that he had, going 5 of 8 from the field, and had what looked like was going to be the go-ahead bucket toward the end of the game with 2 seconds left. But at the same time, he was a plus 17 during his time on the floor, where he played over 35 minutes of the game. So if PJ Washington's offense starts to come along, now that's just another added dimension to the Mavericks offensively that they'll need. Tim Hardaway Jr. only went 2 of 5 in 26 minutes. But as you saw, as the game continues to close in fourth quarters, Maxi Kleber being on the floor at the 5 spot. In this game, Derek Lively played 22 minutes, had 9 points, but was a -5 on the floor. Took another shot to the face as he continues to wear that mask, as far as the broken nose that he is dealing with that was surgically repaired. So there was a lot of good things to like about what the Mavericks did in the game against the Cavaliers. Are they able to continue to build on those things against the Toronto Raptors? The last time the Raptors and the Mavericks got together, the Raptors were able to get a win in Dallas way back on November the 8th. That team looks completely different now with no Pascal Siakam, no OG Anunoby as well, who were terrific that night for the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors, who have won 3 straight games and are 5-5 in their last 10, haven't been able to play for much as they've continued to rebuild their team around Scotty Barnes. RJ Barrett has been pretty good for them, though, since coming over from the New York Knicks in 21 games, averaging over 20 points per game. Scotty Barnes doing the same, averaging over 20 points so far this season for the Toronto Raptors, and, of course, was an all-star this year for the Raptors. So the Mavericks need to get a win. In the bigger picture here, this is about finding a way to get a win as they continue this 4-game road trip. After having the 7-game winning streak, climbing all the way to 6th in the West, dropping their last 2 games, they've got to get a confidence boost, and it's not going to come easy on the road against the Toronto Raptors, even with the return of Dante Exum. But back to the original point here. If this team can finally get fully healthy going forward for the rest of the year, you've seen the production from Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. Since February the 5th, they're averaging over 58 points a game combined. That average obviously goes up when you combine for 75 in the game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. But also when you look at PJ Washington hopefully turning the corner offensively, along with Josh Green's continued good play as well, now you can get a better idea, I feel like, about what the Mavericks are going to be for the rest of the year. Again, a bad loss, a devastating loss, one that you really got to kind of throw away rather quickly to turn the page against Toronto. But then on Friday, when you take on the Boston Celtics, that will be another indication of where this team is as they go forward for the rest of the year. We've talked about it previously. The Mavericks win percentage of their opponent is .495. Not a good start to their post-All-Star break. Yes, they had the win over the Phoenix Suns as part of that 7-game winning streak, but at the same time, they've got to beat some of the better teams going forward to give them an opportunity to climb up the West, because we know how crowded the Western Conference is right now with the Pelicans and the Suns and the Kings and the Mavericks right there in terms of 5 through 8. And then, as I mentioned, with the Golden State Warriors and the Los Angeles Lakers, the Mavericks still have a couple of games against the Warriors before season's end as well. So all of these things coming together as we look forward to the rest of the season. Right now, when you look at the Mavericks, they're 33-25 through 57 games, 15-12 away from the AAC. So as you look, as I mentioned, through 57 games, they've got 25 games left to continue to move up, and more importantly, develop the kind of chemistry and continuity that they need to now with the return of Dante Exum. And one of the things I'll be interested to see going forward here as well is what Jason Kidd decides to do with Jaden Hardy and Tim Hardaway Jr. Jaden Hardy, who has started to come on over the last month or so, playing with a lot more confidence. Tim Hardaway Jr. has been struggling over the last 10, 11 games, shooting well under 38% from 3 and 30% from the field as well. How does he find a way to turn the corner for this team? Because as maligned as he is, you saw some of the better defensive effort from him in the game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, I don't know how long that lasts. I don't know if it'll last at all. But at the same time, Hardaway has got to find other ways to affect the game versus just shooting the basketball. Because when he is hot, obviously, from 3, especially as a catch-and-shoot guy, we know that he can be absolutely lethal. But at the same time, he's got to find different ways to impact basketball games. And Jason Kidd may have to make a decision here soon on if he's going to decide to give Jaden Hardy some more minutes as far as replacing the ones that he's giving Tim Hardaway Jr. Jaden Hardy only playing 5 minutes in the game on Tuesday against the Cleveland Cavaliers. But at the same time, you look at the big man situation, I expect to see a lot more, obviously, from Derek Lively and from Daniel Gafford in the game on Wednesday, with no Maxi Kleber being available. And then you're going to be dealing with the size of the Boston Celtics on Friday, which we'll detail more a little bit later on in the week. So for the Mavericks, it's an opportunity to flush this game down the toilet against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Take the positive things that you were able to do in that game. You cleaned up the turnover problem that you had against the Indiana Pacers, where they turned you over quite a bit and were able to get out in the fast break. You protected the ball much better against the Cleveland Cavaliers, only 5 turnovers in that game, and you were able to turn over the Cavaliers with 16 turnovers of their own, turning that into 24 points. So you've got to be able to rebound the basketball well against the Toronto Raptors, who are 7th in the NBA in terms of offensive rebounding. So you've got to be able to clean up the defensive glass if you're Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford against the Toronto Raptors. You've got to make sure that you're getting and taking care of Scotty Barnes and obviously RJ Barrett. They should have enough to beat the Toronto Raptors. But again, on the second night of a back-to-back, it's real difficult, especially with the travel, going to Toronto, dealing with customs, everything that comes with traveling to Toronto. Hopefully the Mavericks will be able to put the game behind them against Cleveland to be able to have a nice performance on the road against the Raptors. And then you get a day off before you take on the Boston Celtics, another measuring stick game for the Mavericks, taking on the best team literally in the NBA as far as record is concerned. And we know how devastatingly good Boston is, especially from the three-point line in the middle with Kristaps Porzingis, who's been really good for them this year. And you're dealing with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown as well. There will be a lot for this team to have to deal with, which makes the return of Exum that much more important because you've got the length of PJ Washington, Derrick Jones Jr., now Dante Exum gets inserted back into this rotation as well. More guys with length and athleticism to be able to defend when you're dealing with teams as good as Boston. And we will see how that gets put to the test on Wednesday evening when they take on the Toronto Raptors, with the length that they have with RJ Barrett and Scotty Barnes in particular for them. So Dante Exum returning just in time for the Mavericks to be able to help them down the stretch and hopefully remain healthy as the rest of the season goes on, because if they can, now we can get a much, much better picture, clearer picture, if you will, of the Mavericks and how they will be fully formed for the rest of the year. But look, it was an emotional loss, unfortunately, against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The way that the Mavericks played, they played as good as they could to be able to win that game. But in games like this is the second time now that they've blown a double-digit lead against the Cleveland Cavaliers in the regular season. The Mavericks had a 15-point halftime lead in Dallas earlier this year. The Cavaliers came back where Jared Allen had 24 points, 23 rebounds in that game. You had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter with just over 4 minutes to play, and you blew that lead there as well, even though you had the go-ahead bucket with 2 seconds left in that game. You cannot give away these games going forward for the rest of the year, knowing how tight things are in the West. It is paramount that the Mavericks find a way to close out games where they've been the best team in the clutch this season. A lot of folks don't know that. The Mavericks have been the best team in the clutch so far this season. Unfortunately, they were not able to get it done this time against Cleveland. And again, Max Strus gets a lot of credit for the way that he played down the stretch and what he was able to do, knocking down the key three-point shots that he did in order to give the Cavs the win, and obviously the epic buzzer beater that he had to win the game at the buzzer. So the Mavericks now move forward, take on Toronto on Wednesday, take on Boston on Friday before they return home on Sunday to take on the Philadelphia 76ers. They are continuing to reel, obviously, from the loss of Joel Embiid. We'll see if he can come back before the playoffs start in the Eastern Conference for them, but they've got to find a way to get a win on Wednesday. I don't know how they'll fare on Friday. We'll see there, but they've got to have that game on Wednesday in order to feel good about their chances to be able to bounce back, but also to gain some confidence while they're on the road. And one thing they've got to do as we end our show today, they've got to prove that they can beat some really good teams. Their 2 best wins during that 7-game winning streak, they throttled the Oklahoma City Thunder by 35. They also beat the Phoenix Suns as well. 2 good teams that we know and have watched so far this year play really well in the Western Conference. Mavericks, of course, had the bad loss on the road against the Indiana Pacers to begin their 4-game road trip. They had the loss against the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are no slouch, who were 18-2 at one point in a 20-game stretch. We know how good Cleveland has been this year as well, one of the best defensive teams in the league. Mavericks got to prove to themselves, especially getting a win on the road, that they can handle that, and then maybe try to get a win on Friday against the Celtics. Again, we'll have more on that later on in the week. But the Mavericks take on the Toronto Raptors on Wednesday, Celtics on Friday, and then the Sixers on Sunday. I'll have your pre-game shows, your pre- and post-game shows on 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports as well. That's it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, download and subscribe to the Inside the Mavs podcast, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak, wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And also like and comment on this video as well. Let me know how you're feeling about the Mavericks right now as they continue their 4-game road trip. And subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. Until Friday, I'll talk to you again on Inside the Mavs. We'll talk to you later. Peace.